Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Nice to see you all here. And again, Fraser, if you're coming on in, please go ahead and come up to the front and join the party. My name is Ida Rademacher. I'm a vice president at the Aspen Institute, and I co-lead the financial security program there. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first ever Financial Resilience Summit. Thank you for making the time and space to join us. For those of you here that haven't already read the 1,000 emails and the primers and the briefers and been at all the meetings yesterday and today, the convening really is focused on the ways we can modernize our benefit system to create an economic system that's built not for everybody to merely survive a little better, but to truly thrive and be producers and active agents in their own economic mobility and in the economy. We're delighted that today's programming is co-sponsored. We're delighted to work so closely with the Office of Management and Budget on this event. And I want to make sure my talking points don't jump around so I don't miss anything important on that space. They've been a key partner, not only in designing today's meeting and thinking about it, but really in sharing this goal of understanding that helping households have better tools and better experiences managing financial shocks is foundational to long-term financial security and economic mobility. And modernizing the public benefits systems, not just in name at the top level, but in practice at the point of engagement, is going to be how policy truly matters in households' financial lives. FSP, which is my program, the Financial Security Program, we've done a lot of work researching and distilling the research of others to synthesize what are the drivers of financial stability and long-term financial security. And it's a kind of an aha, but there's actually a lot of rigorous research and recent research that does show that the driver of financial stability for a household has three primary pillars. There's the ongoing experience of routinely positive cash flow in a household that helps them weather those shocks. There's the pillar of having personal resources that really help from somebody with those $400 expenses and the ways that they're in the workforce that they can kind of deal with the dips. But that third pillar is benefits, public and private benefits, and the consequential role they help people to manage, because it is impossible to self-insure against the kinds of risks that come down on a household in America today. So when we think about what it takes in terms of both the public and private benefits, we spent the day yesterday at the Aspen Institute offices really delving into what are the innovations, what's the next generation bundle of private sector workplace benefits that employees need to manage shocks. But that's only one side of the coin. The other side of that, and the focus of today, is what does it take in terms of the public benefit system to equip households with the tools that they really need, and what's their experience of having access and really being able to utilize the benefits. Public benefits are critical in this work, and if we do this job right, it's not just about helping households better manage scarcity. That feels very unambitious as a goal to me. It's about really, really equipping people with the tools for that long-term aspirations they have for themselves and their families now, and in the ability to build wealth and transfer that wealth generationally in ways that help those households and communities. I don't think we need to look further than what happened during COVID to understand in a more granular sense the ways that public benefits helped not only households, but this economy weather the last 3 years. Unemployment insurance claims reached 3 million a week in 2020. The number of SNAP participants grew from 37 million in an average month pre-pandemic to 43 million in June of 2020. And the economic impact payments and expanded CTC provided critical lifelines to households, helping them build personal resources, pillar 2, to weather some of those storms in the initial fallout of COVID, but also some of the economic uncertainty that we're facing today in the face of rising costs and inflation. And I think as we open up today in terms of our work and how to improve programs, it's important to emphasize first and foremost that in aggregate, the programs were effective in staving off the worst of potential crises for households during COVID. We did a lot of research on projecting the potential for evictions, and the U.S. avoided millions of evictions because of the ways that public benefits worked for them. And food insecurity did not increase in prevalence from 2019 levels during COVID, during those early times of COVID. People across the income distribution really were able to save more, and they're using those funds now to continue to weather the financial shocks that they're dealing with. We've learned from you, listening to all of you, being in some of these rooms, that implementation is policy. And Tim, our policy director, likes to say that a lot right now and remind us that that is our work, is our job at Aspen, is really listening hard, thinking about how do we equip leaders like you across sectors with the knowledge and the networks to do your jobs for the households that we're all passionate about serving. We really owe the government leaders in this room and anybody who's tuning in to this public session here a huge debt of gratitude for running the programs during COVID that stabilized family finances during that once-in-a-generation emergency. Thank you all for your service during that extraordinarily difficult time. And thank you for your renewed energy in taking learnings about what worked and what didn't forward into a conversation and a deep action day like today. Thank you. I hope that you spend a little time looking at who is in the room with you, and I hope you get to join and meet many of them today. We have such a breadth of leadership that is gathered here today. We have representatives, 30 officials from 20 states represented, all focused on how to better deliver funds to households who need stability from public benefits. We have officials and key staff from half a dozen federal agencies committing to partnership with your states on how to build better systems and deliver quickly and coordinate across programs to ensure people receive all the benefits they qualified for, and how to replicate that work in new states using leading innovations. We have dozens of private sector and nonprofit and philanthropic leaders, those from the civic tech field, which has really come on in such extraordinary ways in the last few years, all here to support the work and the goals of the public sector in really transforming the way that public benefits work. You are leaders committed not to just the ideas, but to action. And our aspiration for the day is that you build real relationships, real connections, real new ways of going forward with this work and working with our partners here to support you in every endeavor there. I like to tell my team that the only kind of meetings I want to be a part of are meetings of consequence. And I really already feel from meeting people yesterday, last night, and thinking about the agenda that's so carefully crafted today, that this will be a meeting of consequence. We really are looking here to listen across the range. So let me just give you a quick rundown of what's going to happen in the agenda today. We are first going to hear from some key leaders from the White House and several federal agencies, highlighting their programs and highlighting the ways that they are building better collaborations with state leaders. And then we will hear directly from a panel of states themselves, who I had the pleasure of having dinner with last night, highlighting the work on the ground that they are doing and aspiring to do, and discussing the challenges they're facing that the federal government can help them to overcome. And once the public portion of the summit closes, those of us that are here in this beautiful auditorium are going to continue the day with a set of deeper discussion and action forums. I want to wrap up and hand this over to Secretary Tanden, but I want to thank a few people, and since I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and take the time to do it. I want to thank first and foremost the leaders at the Office of Management and Budget for co-sponsoring this event with us. Without your willing and active participation, without your ways of kind of coming into our frameworks and into our offices and thinking about how we could do this together, this convening wouldn't have happened. And it certainly wouldn't translate into the nationwide impact that we need, that we are so hopeful about today. I want to thank specifically the Facing Financial Shocks team, especially Jenny Hunt, Mike Wilkening, Sarah Esty, and Alicia Rawl for their partnership and your work in building today's fantastic agenda and getting so many great people here today. To all the speakers today from various agencies and states, thank you. Thank you for your valuable time. Thank you for the work you are doing and will be doing. To our participants from states and other leaders, especially who have traveled to be here, thank you. And of course, I can't help but thank my own team, the financial security team, for all the work that they have put in, both recently and over the last year to make an event like this possible. The comms team, Bridget Hankin, Emmy Urban, Raquan Wedderburn, and Chandra Lim, and to our policy and market solutions team, Karen Andres, Kara Watkins, Sarika Abbey, who recently transitioned, but who really led our Benefits 21 initiative. And of course, to Tim Shaw, who, if you haven't met him yet today, you're in for a treat, is our Director of Policy at the Financial Security Program. So thanks for indulging me, and thank you. Please join me in thanking all of those people for today. Okay, great. And now I really do have the pleasure. I promise. Here we come. Neera Tanden. Neera Tanden is currently serving as a senior advisor and staff secretary to President Biden. She has served in both the Obama and Clinton administrations, and as well, she has worked on so many presidential campaigns, and most recently was the president and CEO, where I got to know her, at the Center for American Progress. She has a long and distinguished career across government, but honestly, even joining these prep calls, she has a real passion for these issues. And thank you for taking on this particular project as one that you own. Please welcome Neera Tanden.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ida, for the fantastic leadership Aspen has shown. And I just want to also thank all of you for being here. As senior advisor to the president, I work on these issues with my great partners at OMB and the U.S. Digital Service team. And we really think of this work in supporting people facing a financial shock as central to our customer service work, which is really central to our work in ensuring people can have faith in their government. So I really want to say thank you to everyone in this room. The leaders across this room are doing I think the most critical work we do in government, which is to help people who are in most need at that moment that they are facing a crisis. Really, at its heart, if government is a partner to that family and helping, no, it sounds odd to some, but government can really make that moment a springboard to mobility, as Ida said. And I on behalf of the president, we think this work is incredibly vital to ensuring we restore basic trust in government going forward. As senior advisor to the president, I lead this work overall on consumer-driven delivery of services, which is really just a fancy way of saying that putting people first and how we organize benefits, how we deliver services, how we really think of what our government should do is the way to ensure that we're effectively and efficiently delivering services. We know that really too often to a family, government can be a kind of bureaucratic haze. And we created this, the president issued an executive order last year on an improving delivery of services and putting the consumer first. Because as he describes it, too often people need to know what to know. What that means is it's information about what your government can do for you is really hard to get and hard to maneuver, and people can feel lost and really separated. And that's why we created this executive order, which was issued last year, which is really to ensure agencies across the board are thinking through how we can put the consumer, the customer first, and how we can design our services around that. Because let's be frank, too often government services are really driven by agency structure or the structure of committees on Capitol Hill, instead of thinking about that person, the person who's just lost their job, who all of a sudden has to worry not only about having a paycheck, but access to healthcare, maybe even food on the table for their child. And how do they navigate all of that? The perspective of this EO and the work of our administration is to think that really we should design the government services around that person's needs, not make them run through several hoops to get services they deserve, but really have an integrated approach so that person has the least stress from their government at a time when they're facing the most financial stress they'll find. So that is at the heart of all of our work. And I just really want to say how grateful I am for all of you to be here, because the truth is we have several federal government programs, but you, the people in this room, are really the drivers of change. You're delivering those services. Your offices are the ones people go to when they're in that moment of crisis. I'm really passionate about this work because of my own experience. When I had a particular experience growing up that made my family really rely on a range of government services. When I was 5, my parents got divorced and my father left. And my mother, who was an Indian immigrant, had never worked before, she really faced this question of whether she should return to India or stay in the United States. If she stayed in the United States, she'd have to go on a series of public benefits. But if she went back to India, she would face incredible social stigma. Not that many people get divorced in India right now, but nobody got divorced in India in 1975. And there was a lot of stigma for her. And she was really concerned about the stigma for me and my brother. So she chose to stay in the United States, and she went on welfare, and we were on food stamps, and I got free and reduced lunch vouchers. And I still remember being the only kid in my school using that 10-cent voucher because it was actually a piece of paper in first grade. And I still remember being with my mom in a line at the then welfare office. And it felt like it stretched into infinity. And I kept asking my mother, how long we were going to be there. And she kept saying, just a minute. And I still remember saying to her, you said just a minute, many times. And she looked at me and said, I'm just doing the best I can. And I understood, the stress we were all under when my mother said that to me. And I know the work every single person in this room is doing is to help families like mine get through those moments. Now, my mother was on welfare for a few years, and eventually she got a job as a travel agent. And then a few years later, she got a job at Raytheon. And I'm incredibly proud to say that within 5 or 6 years, she owned her own home in Bedford, Massachusetts. And I went to great public schools, and I eventually, went to UCLA, and many decades later, I am here. But I am only here because there was a government there, a government services there to make sure my family in that moment of crisis was able to not just have a safety net, but a springboard. And so that is why I think I am devoted to this work. It is a high priority for us in the White House. I am excited to work with many states here and the states here to ensure that we are doing everything we can as an administration. I know there's a lot of hurdles. Some of them are legislative, but we want to do everything we can as an administration to make sure that we are delivering services. Because I know it's not just that we're delivering these services. It truly matters how. It truly matters whether we're contributing to the stress or making it as seamless as possible. Because in those moments of crisis, taking days or weeks or months to deliver services makes all the difference in the world. It makes the difference of whether that shock is going to be more permanent or less permanent. It makes a difference between whether that family is going to feel like they have the resilience, and that is such an important word here, the resilience to weather a storm and move back to mobility. So I am excited about the day. I am so grateful for all of you traveling as you did to come here. And I look forward to not just this conference, but the work we will all do together for in the weeks, months, and years ahead to transform benefits so that we really do deliver a system that is not a safety net, but a springboard. Thank you. I failed in my number one mission, which is to introduce a great partner to us in the White House, Robin Carnahan, who's the head of GSA. So she kind of is hosting all of us, but I have to also say she is a transformative leader. She is always thinking about how to get results, how to drive results for people, how to reform our government in a way that makes it work better for people. She's been a fantastic partner, and I'm excited to introduce her.
Well, thank you so much, Neera. You know, it means a lot to have you here today. Thank you for that powerful personal story. But just so y'all know, Neera has this really big job. It covers every topic that goes to the president's desk, no matter where it comes in the world. So the fact that she has taken time to be here with us today tells us a lot, both about her commitment, but the commitment of the president as well. So thank you so much. Aspen Institute team, thank you for pulling us together, our OMB friends. This is great. I said as I was walking in, I am with my people. I see so many friends in this crowd, and I have been working with you all in the trenches for many years on this topic. So it's great to be able to host you here at GSA today. Bottom line is that trust in government depends on government's ability to deliver. We know that too many times technology is that intermediary about delivery. And too many times the technology is a thing that fails. We know over and over again that one person's experience, how long they have to stand in that line, whether they feel like their government is meeting their need at that time that they have to turn to government for help. It's our job, all of us in this room, not just folks in government, to figure out a way to make that process and that interaction more secure, more simple, and just hassle-free. That is the number one thing that we can do to build and rebuild trust to the people that we serve. Now, since my days as Secretary of State, I have understood very well that government is basically a service delivery business. I understood that if your websites worked, it made for happier customers. I understood that also made for lower costs. I also understood that things could go bad pretty quickly, and they often did, that too many times things were over budget, over time, or just didn't work. And then I would get phone calls about that. I will tell you that I've always thought that there was nothing that caused me more stress in my whole time serving in office than the rollout of some new tech tool. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but it sure felt that way to me. Often we just see that bad delivery and bad tech sinks good policy. And whether that's a small business that's applying for a loan during the pandemic, or somebody looking for unemployment checks, or food or housing benefits, or even COVID tests, we saw these systems fail over and over again throughout the pandemic, which is why maybe some of you all have heard me say before, our job is to make the damn websites work, right? Because that's how people think they want to get their services delivered. So I joined the Biden administration really to help focus on those things. So whether you're at an NGO, whether you are in the state government, whether you're in the federal government, whether you're at one of our companies, partners I see out in the room, it is all of our jobs to make the damn websites work. The good news is we learned a lot during the pandemic about what didn't work and what did work. I want to talk about 3 of those things today, but before I get to that, I just want to say the non-negotiables for all of us in government have got to be security, resilience, and accessibility, right? Those are the foundational things that every system and interaction has to have. But I want to talk about the 3 things in the Biden administration that we are very much focused on that is trying to help just the interaction of the people. The first is we need to be focusing on customers at the moment we're designing and building these systems, because we know that gives better results. Seems pretty basic, but it doesn't always happen. The second thing I want to talk about is why it's so smart to share and reuse these tools rather than having everybody in every state and every agency reinvent the wheel doing the same thing. And then the third thing I want to talk a little bit about is funding and procurement. Don't fall asleep when we talk about procurement. It turns out it's a really big deal, because if we do that smarter and better, we know we can set these things up for success. So I want to talk a little bit about what the administration's thinking about on that, as well as what we are doing here at GSA. So customer service, how do we make that number 1? Well, I want to say that, just reiterate, Neera, you mentioned the executive order that the president signed. Y'all, he signed that in his first year in office. This is a big deal. He really cares about this. But not only is it the executive order, but also there's a thing called the president's management agenda. And that is focused on one of the key pillars of that is delivery, right? So we're seeing these things combine all the time. Customer experience and delivery, those really are things that go hand in hand. And beyond that, we know that there are some things that we got right in this. Let me just see a show of hands. Anybody remember the whole COVID test website, covidtest.gov site? It was 1 year ago. It was like in January. I went on, I got one of those tests. I love that this story, and I think I've maybe told a few of you before, but when that all was stood up by the Postal Service, it was a very big deal. Lots of people across government got involved in that. And they wanted to make sure it was secure and easy to use and was able to deal with the high spikes in volume, right? Tens of millions of people that would need it at the same time. So as that was being launched, I called my mother and I gave her the website, and I said, Mom, you need to go online. And she's 88. You need to go online. You need to do this. She's like, oh, no, can't you do it for me? And I said, no, really, it's going to be fine. Go ahead and do it. I kid you not, in 90 seconds, she calls back and she said, wow, that was really easy. Wow, that was a well-designed website. And then she put the zinger in and said, are you going to make all the government websites work that well? So we are relentlessly focused on that at GSA and in the administration. Here, we have a public benefits team that is working very directly with state and federal partners who are in the public benefits space to make sure that we can figure out what are some of those shared technologies that can reduce the burden on the people who need these services. One of the things that we're going to be talking about this afternoon in one of the sessions, I hope y'all will attend, is a text messaging service, right? As a sort of a shared service that we can offer that's easily integrated. And obviously that's a way that you can get much better service to the people that your mission is to help, but also save you all a lot of time and money. So we're looking actively for state partners in that. So make a note, text messaging, that's one of the shared services we're talking about, want to get your feedback about. The second thing I mentioned is just more about these shared services and what GSA is doing. To me, it's one of the smartest bets in government is to think about where are these common things that we just do over and over again that would be better, faster, and cheaper if we could do a shared service with it. We have a couple I want to talk about just briefly. One is called the U.S. Web Design System. What is that? It is actually a pretty cool thing. It is open source, free, like write that in big letters, free, open source. And it is a way your developers who are putting together your websites can make sure they are accessible, that they meet all of those standards, that they are mobile friendly and easy to use. So free, open source, US Web Design System, you should use it. 91 federal agencies use it. Fully half of all federal websites use it. And get this, over 1 billion page views per month are reflective of the US Web Design Standards. So it's a smart play. States ought to think about it as well. Another important shared service is something called login.gov. And the idea there is that everybody, when you go to a government website, you have to have a secure place to log in and verify who you are, right? We saw over and over again throughout the pandemic that simple process of verifying that you are the person you say you are so that you could legitimately get a service was a breaking point. So login.gov is something that's being used by federal agencies. We already have about 60 million people that use it, from veterans to farmers and students and folks looking to travel overseas. It's also being used by 3 states. It's used in Arkansas to access unemployment benefits, in California to access travel benefits for seniors, and in Colorado to help folks manage their paid leave, as well as universal pre-K services. This is another one of those things. If you're a state, we've got this incredible login and identity verification service that's secure and easy to use and easy to integrate. We are looking actively for more partners there. So again, if that's of interest, we are interested in talking to you. Third thing, procurement and funding. One of my favorite topics. We all know that the speed of change when it comes to technology just completely outpaces the speed of budgeting, right? You think about it. By the time you know that you need a thing and you put in a request for it, and then it has to go to the Congress or your legislature to get passed, and then it comes back and you have to figure out how to scope the procurement, and then you put it out on the street, and then you bring your vendors on. Like, years have passed. So by the time it gets deployed, it's already out of date. So what have we done to try to solve for that? Well, one of the most important things is a new program that started a few years ago called the Tech Modernization Fund. And it is, to me, one of the smartest plays in government, because it's a way to set up your funding that meets the speed of need, right? And it's a $1.3 billion fund. It's really a smart thing because a few things are unique about it. Not only is it outside the traditional budget cycle that's too slow, so it can move fast, but get this, it has technologists making the investment decisions. Let that soak in for a second, because that is a smart thing to do. Many times, those of us in leadership positions are being asked to make technology decisions we don't know anything about. We don't know how much it should cost. We don't know the right questions to ask, but to have a fund where we're thinking of it like an investment fund, where we know that we want impact and we want to see results before we put that money in, it is a great, smart play. And the good news is it has had big results already. It's helped the Department of Labor speed up visa applications for H-2A visas and saved money, right, Chike? It's also helped the Department of Agriculture do lots more inspections of food and purchases around the country. I know we've also done other things across the government, a lot around cybersecurity, right? Because that's an issue for all of us to be having top of mind. One of the other things besides the Tech Modernization Fund here at GSA that we're focused on is sharing best practices. I was at GSA before in the Obama and Trump administrations, and one of the things that we did was think about how we could take some of these things we learned about procurement and technology and help spread it to states. There's a thing you can go online and take a look at. It's called the De-Risking Guide. So if you look up GSA and De-Risking Guide for technology projects, this will come up. Very, very useful, particularly for non-technical leaders who are being asked to make decisions about technology projects and how to make them better. We also know that one of the best things you can do to improve this interaction, particularly in these online tools, is to improve that customer experience. We know if it's in plain language, right, a website or a form, not only is it easier for people to use, but it saves you money as a state because people aren't calling your office or a call center trying to understand what's going on. But we also know that doing that work is hard. Some people are really good at it, some are not. And it's hard to know what vendors that you're going to bring on board that you can trust to do this kind of customer service work well. One of the things GSA is focused on is trying to figure out how to make it easier for you all to bring those kind of design and content people on, because I am convinced that 60% of our problems in customer delivery could be fixed with better design and better content. So I could go on and on about this topic, but we have a lot of other great speakers here today. Just want to leave it by saying first, can all the folks from GSA and TTS stand up for a sec? I know some of you all are over here. Yes. Okay. So y'all look around. These are folks you should put questions to. Okay. So they know the answers to everything that GSA, you can sit if you want. They know the answers to everything that GSA is providing, both in public benefits to our state and federal partners. So I hope you will seek them out today and ask about what we can do for you. My main sort of ask of all of you is that for our federal and state partners, we want to work with you. We have a really smart team. We have great tools, and we have a mandate from the president to make customer service our top priority. So thank you all again for being here today, and I will look forward to working with you going forward. All right, Tim, come on up. Thanks for doing this. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ida, Neera, and Administrator Carnahan for those great opening remarks to start our day. I think in particular, Neera, your personal story is reminiscent of many of the things that the reason that people are here in this room is that you were or know someone who really needed public benefits to make it in your life. And that is why there's so much passion in this room. And also Administrator Carnahan, that's why so many of us are willing to sit through long conversations about procurement to make this work. I was on a prep call with someone who was prepping their boss for this meeting, thinking about things, and wanted to say, like, I really want to know what specific things about procurement I'm able to say and who I get to say it to, because this has been like the blocker for all these changes. And she went on for maybe 5 minutes, and then she took a pause. I was like, I'm so sorry. I was like, no, this is exactly what we're here for. And then she like had a big sigh of relief and said, I'm so glad you get it. This is a room where people get it. And that's the type of conversations we want to have. At that level of detail, we all know is why we need, is what we need to get into to make the changes we need to these systems. One of the markers I think of a good event like this is the other events that wrap up around it. And if it inspires additional conversations and action taking and relationship building. And I want to thank the American Public Human Services Association for gathering those some of those folks together in a pre-meeting where they had 17 human services secretaries, directors, CEOs, and commissioners to talk about what they were going to bring today to this conversation to all these people they want to partner with. And I got a sneak peek from Secretary Brown from Oklahoma as to what they wanted to talk about today. They wanted to share to set up for our next panel. There are three themes that I wanted to touch on. One, states need federal partnership on shared values and language on these programs and shared metrics for success. We need to go to the same place together. Second, and I think this is what this forum is for, states need a seat at the table. The solutions to modernizing public benefits programs need to be developed with their insights and experience. And last, state needs support in getting the tools necessary, especially technology, to implement solutions. I'm thrilled that this next panel that I'll be moderating includes key federal leaders to discuss addressing those exact needs. And I'm very excited based on the prep calls that we're going to be able to dig into those details on behalf of the states in this room and the rest of the people who lead on this. But to lead us into this important panel, I want to invite Deputy Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Andrea Palm, to give us some opening remarks. Deputy Secretary. Briefly on her bio, because if I give the full bio for everyone, we'll be here all morning. But I think most importantly, she was recently a leader in the state of Wisconsin and knows, therefore, the interactions that we need and the partnerships we need to build between states and federal government to make this happen. So thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. It is good to be back with state folks. As a generally a person who spent most of my career at the federal level, it was a really important opportunity for me to go back to the state level and be reminded about what it really feels like to be the person when the rubber hits the road, and that connection between the feds and the states, and how our work together makes the lives of the people we serve easier or not easier, and that we can be deliberate and intentional about those choices. And I do really hope that in this role at HHS that you see in the work we're doing, that we really are committed and understand the challenges that you all face on a day-to-day basis. So with that, thank you, Tim, for the introduction. I really am pleased to be here. Appreciate the Aspen Institute's sponsorship of this panel and the really important work that we're trying to do in this space. The Biden-Harris administration has really made improving service delivery and customer experience a priority across departments, and HHS has been a really strong supporter, and I hope is seen as a leader in interagency benefits delivery work under our customer experience executive order. I think one of the things we really know at HHS is that we often are serving the same families in different programs, and that if we're really going to put people at the center of what we do, orienting to them instead of to our programs is a really important shift in mindset and compass about how we think about what we need to do. So improving the timely delivery of critical benefits and services to Americans can really significantly impact their health and well-being. And so we really are grateful for this executive order, for the challenge that it has placed in front of us to do this work differently and better moving forward. You know, we, as I said, we touch so many Americans at HHS, from disaster survivors to single parents, to veterans, to refugees, to immigrants. And we really understand that they face a number of hurdles, and that the way they interact with us is really critical to how their well-being is influenced. So I'm really proud of the way across HHS we've stepped up to do work in this space and think about delivering services differently to meet families where they are in the moment that they're experiencing. Already we're working to do things like making cross enrollment easier among many of our core programs that support families. For example, Medicaid and SNAP are working together in an effort to share data to facilitate renewals between both of those programs. As all of you know, Medicaid and SNAP support nearly 90 and 42 million folks respectively. Many of them are enrolled in both programs, and how we think again about putting them at the center of what we do is a really critical use case for doing that kind of work in other places. And last year we did enact a policy change that will make SNAP recipients categorically eligible for Head Start, again, reducing barriers to benefits and thinking about the families that we serve. We really are excited to see the life experiences work continue, with greater connections between HHS, USDA, DOL, other agencies, to really challenge us to build muscle across the federal government to do this work better. And these life experiences, again, really important use cases to develop muscle and think about ways to do this work as normal course. That's just the way we do what we do at our agencies. And so while this work is really often driven by the federal government, we can't do what we need to do without partnerships with states. If you've seen one Medicaid program, you've seen one Medicaid program. And I think our ability to have relationships individually with states, as well as to be able to lift up best practices, lessons learned, provide tools, create forums in which you all can share information, I think is a really important part of how we think about lifting up innovative things that you're doing, sharing them across, and learning those lessons ourselves at the federal level. As we discussed, and as Tim noted, I did serve as the Secretary for Health Services in the state of Wisconsin. And when I wasn't the tip of the spear on a pandemic response, we did a number of things, and we're focused on a variety of ways to think about our own transformation, including the development of an app and improvements to that app around Medicaid enrollment, being able to update documents, being able to interface with our program without having to go in person. We also did a lot of work to think about vital records. We were the storage, the holder of truth about vital documents, your birth certificates, your marriage certificates, death certificates, et cetera. And we did a lot of work to digitize and push those to the lowest level so that people could access that information at sort of the least burden for them. And so I think that there are a lot of ways in which states are doing important work to facilitate customer experience and access to information and services for their citizens. And we should be doing more of that and looking for more opportunities to do that. So our commitment to making it easier for families to connect to their government brings really all of us together today, and our teams are committed to doing that work. We're excited to do that work. I think it's a really important challenge we must level to ourselves and to our colleagues to really put the people that we serve at the center of what we do. And so I'm anxious to hear from my colleagues, to do the panel, to be able to engage with all of you, get to some Q&A and discussion here, so that we can continue to do this work together. So I really do think we share a goal of better serving the American people, and really I'm excited to be able to do that work with you all here today and moving forward. So with that, Tim, I think I will turn it back to you. All right. Thanks, everybody.
You do? Yeah. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Palm, and we're excited to, as you said, get the conversation started. Again, I'm just going to briefly introduce folks so that we can get right to the discussion, but I'm excited today that we have joining us Simchah Suveyke-Bogin, the Chief Customer Experience Officer of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Clare Martorana, the Federal Chief Information Officer of the Office of Management and Budget, and Chike Aguh, the Chief Innovation Officer at the U.S. Department of Labor. A couple of quick notes for our panelists. For the mics, please keep it close to your mouth. That way we will be able to successfully hear you in the room, but also online. Simchah, I wanted to kick off with you. Deputy Secretary Palm shared a bit about the project already, but tell us a little bit more about the Customer Experience Executive Order. How does that align with your work at USDA, and how do you see states as partners in that work?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. USDA is a really huge partner in this effort, especially with the executive order. We manage SNAP, WIC, a lot of programs that the general public really depends on. And the executive order really hits on all these key life experiences that were mentioned earlier: financial shock, birth of a child. So really the partnership with states and the partnerships with our fellow colleagues at other federal agencies are exceptionally important. So we're really digging deep into the data, into conversations regarding processes, conversations regarding where we have gaps and where we have to dig deeper into service delivery and design. A lot of what my office is focused on partnering with the different agencies at USDA is to really elevate how to put and the emphasis is on the how, right? And how do you really intentionally focus on the customer when you design services, when you design delivery? There are methods, there are specialists, there are designers out there, there are technical experts that we all can partner with, acquire through contracts and other ways. But there are ways in the how, and that is really a big mission of our office at USDA and also with our fellow agencies as well.
Thank you. Clare, I'm going to turn to you for some opening remarks also. What do you see as the biggest opportunities to use technology and data at the federal level to improve benefits delivery? And also during our prep call, we had talked quite a bit about how policy needs to be informed by implementation. And you've had a long career at the intersection of those roles. How do we make sure to do that well?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Great conversation. Policy fails if implementation fails. right? That is just full stop. It is very easy for us, the office that I run, the Office of of e-government and of the Federal Chief Information Officer, we are responsible for policy and implementation for IT and cybersecurity across the federal government. And what I have, in the time I have been in government, which is now going on 7 years, I have been really startled at times that our policies did not take into consideration what the practical reality is on the ground, both at the state level and certainly at the agency level. So I've spent some time as an agency CIO. I spent some time on a digital service team at the VA. And oftentimes we were reading these policies that were so well-intentioned, that were really trying to lead, but they actually left us a bit short in our ability to implement on the ground at an agency and deliver those services to our customers. And so coming into this role as a chief information officer, it has really been my goal and the kind of the goal of the collaboration that we have across GSA with the White House, with the United States Digital Service, to turn this model inside out. For us to think about, we start with designing with users. So that's why these life experiences are so critical. We have to understand where service is being delivered. And then we have to work backwards to make sure that we understand what our policy objectives are and try and meet those things. So that is what we have been focused on. And at the end of the day, delivery of services happens with all of you. It happens on the local level. I've spent my career in healthcare technology, and nobody goes to a national doctor, right? You go to your local doctor. And it is the same with the delivery of these services that we are working so hard in the administration to make sure that we streamline. But it is about the last mile and delivery of those services to the customers that you all serve. So that's why this conversation is so important. And we are really looking forward to hearing from you all to make sure that we have that in mind as we are doing policy development at the federal level.
Thank you, Clare. And I think I'm going to come back to you at some point to go a little bit deeper on that, because in conversations with many of the states that we've had so far, that intersection of policy or even the programmatic side and the technology can be a bumpy relationship point and a difficult place to build connections and do that sort of design that you're talking about. So I'd love to hear from you later about that. But I'm going to turn to Chike now. From your seat at the Department of Labor, especially on the UI side, I think you all are emblematic of the lessons that we had to learn in response to the pandemic on how to make these systems respond quickly. I just shared the stat about how many people ended up being on UI a week. I think it was 3 million folks. And I'm curious what lessons you all learned from that time at the Department of Labor about the need to modernize technology and the delivery of public benefits.
How much time do we have? So first of all, just let me start off just saying very much thank you to OMB and to Aspen for having this conversation, for having us here, and from my secretary, Marty Walsh, and from my boss, Julie Sue, the deputy secretary. It was really excited to be part of this conversation. I think it's important to set some context, because I think I'll throw some compare and contrast out there that are really just staggering when you think about what happened to the American economy and to the unemployment insurance system when the pandemic happened. So before the pandemic, the worst month of job loss in American history was December of 2008, between 800 and 100,000 jobs lost. That was the record. We all remember, I think, how bad that time was. In April of 2020, 20 million American jobs evaporated, 2 million permanently. Similarly, for the unemployment insurance system, the record for weekly claims was set the year before I was born, in October of 1982. It was 695,000. You say 3 million, which was the average when I came into the administration, January of 2021. But in 2020, we had weeks, the record during 2020 was 6.6 million a week. Again, multiples of the average, and then put on top of a system that, frankly, for the last half century, we've under-resourced and underfunded across the country, and even here at the federal level. So in some ways, you had kind of a perfect storm. Even with that, we delivered over $800 billion in unemployment insurance benefits in about that year and a half to almost a third of the American workforce. And that's very much thanks to many of the people who are in this room and your colleagues. I think some of the things that I won't say that we learn, but that we're learning, because frankly, we're still at the early innings of this. I think number one, we've got to put the customer at the center, and you've heard this said a number of times. We say at the Department of Labor, the day that someone files for unemployment insurance is the worst day of their lives. They're thinking about how they're going to go home and talk to their spouse about how they're going to take care of the groceries and the rent. They're going to tell their kids they're not going to do something that they wanted to do that year. That is the wrong time to give them a very complicated form and say, figure it out. So putting that customer at the center. And then we also have to be clear about what customer, because they're the folks who frankly show up in unemployment insurance lines a lot. Folks who are in a union. People, if you look at the rates, people who are in unions are far more likely to apply. Just as one example. Folks who are, frankly, make more money are more likely to apply because they even know. We need to think about the people who don't apply. We need to think about, frankly, folks who are in shift work, agricultural workers, workers of color. And we have said, and my deputy secretary specifically has said, put those people at the center of our analysis, because if we solve their problems, we solve everyone else's problems. And that's what we've been able to do in our modernization work in concert with many states across this country. I think secondly, you'll hear a lot about technology here. We love technology. We are investing in it. We helped pilot the first login.gov pilot in the state of Arkansas. We're very proud of that. We have worked with a number of states around that. But what we found is that experience is key. And when we say experience, let's take plain language. I don't care what technology you use. I don't care what language you translate it into. If the language is confusing, the result will be the same, which is that someone doesn't get the benefits that they deserve. And when we looked at the backlogs in states, we found, yes, the technology had a ton of problems, but it was because generally an application was denied because someone filled out the question wrong because it wasn't clear. And so working with states to create that plain language, that's just one example, is really key. And so the technology follows the sociology. We need to make the experience right from the point, and then the technology and the processes can follow, but we have to put that first. I think thirdly, what we've seen is my boss will talk a lot about unleashing our power, which is in government at times, like you feel like we can't do something because we didn't get budget, we didn't get people, we didn't get a new statute. But we have so much priority and ability in terms of what we already have. And so what we found was a lot of states who actually overinterpreted their restrictions based on how the UI law is written. So I'll use one small example. We had a state that wanted to, in their online UI application, to put up little comment bubbles. Hey, this question in this confusing language actually means this. The secretary was told, no, we can't do that because DOL will say no. I went to my colleagues at the Office of Unemployment Insurance and said, hey, can the state do this? And I said, absolutely. And so we at the federal level, as well as in states, need to communicate there's far more freedom at times than is believed. And we should always start from what is best for the customer, and then let's work backward from what the law said. Again, never violate the law, but figure out the space in between that allows us to serve customers best. I'll say the last thing, which is per the Social Security Act of 1935, the unemployment insurance system is a state and federal partnership. Until that changes, that's what it is. 53, not 51, not 50, 53 separate systems, which can look wildly different. And that is why we have worked in partnership with states to do things like our first login.gov rollout, to do things like plain language pilots, and a number of other things that I won't jump ahead of my colleagues that we are rolling out. And that's one way, and we are intently looking for more state partners, because we know, because the systems are so different, that we have to work with states to work this out. And I think if we get this right, what we hope to have is a system that is more equitable, more accessible, but also more resilient, because this will not be the last recession that we face. This will not be the last economic crisis that we face. And so we're thinking about what happened prior, but frankly, thinking about what might happen next as well.
Thank you, Chike. Deputy Secretary Palm, HHS already has so many different programs under its purview. How do you support your own programs in breaking down silos in working together? And what further opportunities do you see for HHS to do similar work across agencies?
Appreciate the question. And I think it's, I noted a couple of specific examples in my opening remarks that I won't go back to, but I think if I could just lift up a little, I think, and I did sort of allude to this, a lot of this is about the way we do our work, right? It is easy to do the work in a lane that is defined by the program, by the statute, by the regulations, and not think about how it might be connected to something else that we're doing somewhere else in the department. And I think for us, particularly since we often serve the same families, it is our responsibility to do that work. It is harder work, but it is the way we should do the work. And so when in my role as deputy secretary, when I think about how we are challenging ourselves to do that and build that muscle, one of the easiest vehicles from my perspective is to think about it, sort of labeling it in a cross-cutting way. So we are doing a bunch of work in the behavioral health space. There are very few parts of our department that don't touch that system or that don't have ways in which they are doing behavioral health work. And so by finding a common problem, a common policy problem that we're trying to solve, we really are able to leverage the different programs to do the work differently. And so we developed a roadmap for behavioral health integration. It really challenges us to think about how there is no wrong door to those kind of services, and to look at the problem from the perspective of the people that we're serving and the ways in which they need to access care, and how we can reduce barriers to that, how we can bring funding streams together, how we can align policies and programs, how we can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think for us, building the muscle around this use case, which is not just a problem that we need to solve, but is a priority in which we have a real significant opening and interest, considering what we've learned in the pandemic, et cetera. There's real opportunity here to lift up, to lead, and to reduce barriers to these services, but at the same time teaching ourselves and getting into the habits of doing work in a less siloed, more collaborative, and again, sometimes more difficult way, but in one that results in outcomes that are far better for the people that we serve. But I think it really is about building muscle and habits and relationships across programs that facilitate that kind of work as a way we do our business, no matter what it is that we're challenged to do. And so finding ways, finding use cases, finding examples, using the tools that you have to build that muscle, I think is a really important way to start this work. And then it gets embedded and becomes normal course of business in a way that we would all want to leave our institutions prepared and calibrated to do work in the future, so that we're not retrofitting these things. We're not chasing problems because we've thought about integration and reducing barriers and silos on the front end. So and we'll look for others, but I think behavioral health is just so ripe right now. And it's there's lots of bipartisan interest in Congress. The president has tasked us to prioritize ending this idea that we treat the neck up differently than we treat the neck down. And so it really has provided us with a great opportunity to think differently about the work and get into better habits about how we do it moving forward.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Palm. Simchah, I want to bring you in here because I think you all at USDA are doing very similar work, and I want to hear how you are approaching that and working across agencies and silos.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things that we're really focused on is that needs piece, the how. So when we talk about putting people at the center, what work has been done by agencies already or states already when interpreting what are those needs? How are we interpreting the problems that they're facing? So I think these life events, especially the financial shock one, is just a great catalyst for us having that conversation in a deeper way. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of information that we already have access to about what people are doing, what activities they're signing up for, where people are falling short. But how do we use that data and then maybe in addition, go to the field, talk to some of the people in the front line. How do we engage people who, as Chike said, are not engaged in our services today, but we know absolutely that they need those services. So with agencies like Rural Development, our Food Nutrition Service, our Farm Service Agency, we're talking to a lot of frontline folks who are actually delivering these things to the public directly. And then we're interpreting our data in a way that we're looking for those gaps. Where do we not understand? Where are we potentially making assumptions, so that we're not jumping into, we're trying to do good. We think that building this thing or this tool or this app is really going to help. Instead of jumping right into it, what else do we need? What tools do we need about the customer so that we know whatever we do design is truly centered around them? And that is a very collaborative thing. A lot of what we were seeing in the past was throwing things over the wall, right? Think we want to do this thing, so we're going to give it to the IT shop, and then hopefully they'll build us something, or hopefully this vendor will build us something that works. And then we'll put it out there to the public, and then until we hear anything, we'll know if it works or not. And that kind of thinking is not going to work, and it's not really going to cut it. A lot of the times we have to bring all those different agencies or parts of our offices like IT, like behavioral science, like social sciences in the room with us when we're talking about the idea, when we're talking about the needs of the customer very early. So when you have these problems, we're talking to our agencies now, are these really problems? Do we know that these are problems? Is it just from our perspective at the agency level, or are we really hearing enough? Do you have enough data to support what this problem is from the public's perspective? And that's a lot of what the executive order is actually helping us do as well. So in addition to these life events, it's also having intentional ways in which we should be engaging the public. Do we ever ask them how we're doing? Do we ever ask the public, do you trust what we're actually engaging with you on? Do you feel that the services that we're delivering are helping you? Do you feel like it's easy? If we've never engaged our public in any of those questions before, a lot of what the executive order is driving is to do that, or to start doing that, and use that as also data that that can inform you on your on the public, on the services that you're providing. Because if we only rely on 20,000 loans were applied for, 30,000 of them dropped off halfway in, and that's all the data that we have on the customer, that's not enough. And so really, we're really trying to be intentional about how does design thinking, how does human-centered design work fit into all of these activities that we all want to do. But there are terrific ways that industry, the tech sector, civic tech, and others are doing to actively integrate real human needs with a lot of these great ideas that we all have. So.
Thank you. We've heard a lot. We heard a lot about customer-centered approaches here. Am I on? We've heard a lot about this being very person-centered and customer focused, and I think the folks in this room are very bought in on that approach to things. But I think what's helpful is to get to more specific examples of the types of challenges that folks might be facing in the room in doing that sort of cross-office, cross-agency work on integrating the programmatic and policy with the tech side. So Clare, I was wondering if I could come back to you like I promised I would, on if you have some examples on how state CIOs and program offices, the federal CIOs work with their agencies, what are some examples of how we can make that system work together? And if you can weave in the 21st Century Integrated Digital Experiences Act and how that supports that work at the federal side, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, that's a loaded question, but thank you. I think that number one, I have not found a technology problem in government that is not reasonably easy to solve, that has not wholesale confounded the technologists that we have access to. Most of the challenges are that we do not have the right people in the room at the right time. I think to really foot stomp your point, the CIO needs to be in the room from the beginning with the program, trying to understand what the business needs are so that they can bring the right technology team that might be a combination of contractors and federal employees into the conversation. And that needs to include security. I have never built a product or service that did not benefit from having those people at the beginning of the conversation and held accountable through the launch and deployment and measurement of the impact of that system. So making sure that your CIO not only has a seat at the table, they need to have a voice in the room. And if you don't have a CIO that is the right business partner, find another person on the technology team that can play that translational role. That is really, really critical. The second part I think that is important is the making sure that the systems that we are thinking about. So human-centered design is foundational. One of the first questions I ask many CIOs I interact with are, who's your customer? And it's always interesting to me to hear those answers. Many of them will also reference the federal employee as their customer as well. In your case, your employees who are doing that service delivery are part of the research that we need to do to make sure that we're designing the right systems that can be utilized for that service delivery. So another important nuance, I think, that to foot stomp, making sure that the employees are included in the research that you're doing. To touch on the 21st century idea, it is a wonderful piece of legislation that came out in 2018, and it focuses on the very basics of service delivery. Everything has to be accessible, going to the plain language conversation that we were having. Mobile, digital by default, and mobile first. Not that every one of our service delivery channels will be totally optimized by having people on smartphones, but the reality is probably 75% of people can use those devices to actually get access to services. But we also, by being digital by design, it is, modernizing forms, modernizing many of the other processes that are the other entanglements and steps that we have to go through for service delivery. So making sure that you're thinking strategically about that from the inception of your service delivery and service design modeling. And then many other parts of it, if you do that right, you are going to be able to improve your throughput at the call center, right? If you're thinking about your service design and kind of architecting it correctly, you will actually be able not only to serve people more effectively, but get better data back to be able to measure and quickly adjust your service delivery and possibly your technical design so that you are able to better serve those other multi-channels that could be text, they could be your bots that are running, they could be your call center. So I think that there are huge opportunities we are working on some guidance for the 21st century idea. ACT is the last A of idea, so I always stumble on this. So I still call it 21st Century Idea ACT. We are working on guidance because while this was put out in 2018 and was rather self-explanatory, we do need to do some additional work to help agencies embrace component pieces of it, and then also align our budget process upstream to make sure that we are supporting that. And something that we've been really successful doing in the cybersecurity front, and we know that we can also do this on the service delivery and IT modernization front.
Thank you, Claire. Deputy Secretary Palm, I want to turn to you. A big challenge for this work in this year is particularly the likely public health unwinding coming up. How are you taking lessons learned from IT modernization, customer experience, and human-centered design to support states and beneficiaries in ensuring that all eligible people remain enrolled through that unwinding?
It's a big piece of work for us. And I would certainly just first acknowledge that I guess it was earlier this week. I lose track of time. Time is like a flat circle, right? It just, we as an administration did articulate an end to the emergency declaration around the national disaster and the public health emergency as of May 11th. And so we have been anticipating and thinking about as we should, that date eventually coming for well over a year now, right? We utilized many emergency authorities and waivers, flexibilities, et cetera, all across the department throughout the pandemic. And so thinking about their sunset, the unwinding, if we want to keep them, what do we need to do that? Is it regulation? Is it statute? Surfacing those conversations. So there's been a lot of work in anticipation of what now is this May 11th date. As it relates to unwinding, I hope you all can attest as much as I can to the fact that we have been very engaged with states around unwinding and our mission to really, together with all of you, make sure that coverage losses are as minimal as possible. And to that end, we announced a special enrollment period for all those who might lose Medicaid coverage and need an opportunity to shop in the marketplace during the unwinding period, as well as the development, I'm sure in the numbers of thousands of things like toolkits and resources and technical assistance documents and ways in which we are sharing best practices across states about how they're thinking about doing this redetermination work, again, in a way that accurately gets you solid redetermination numbers and but does reduce burden on the people that we're serving. And so, for example, I heard just yesterday, one of the states is looking at using their EBT data, understanding that that's a likely place to have a really good set of contact information for somebody, and that is probably a good source of a way to be in contact with folks to make sure we're catching everybody with accurate contact information to let them know that they need to come back in for redetermination. So how we help surface those best practices, how we help think about strategies, recognizing workforce challenges that you all have, that we have, that are sort of experienced across the economy right now. How you're going to get all this work done is a challenge. How we problem solve with you, troubleshoot with you, do that work together with you as you are thinking about this redetermination process, which, the omnibus set out for us a step down in which some of your states started yesterday, notifying recipients that they need to come back for redetermination with an allowable termination date starting April 1, and other states will be a little slower all the way through the July timeframe. But we recognize that this work is happening now and are very interested in making sure we are partnering with you all to surface challenges, best practices, and doing cross-learning in ways that are helpful to all of you. We started our work together really sort of with everyone, and have over time done it regionally, done it one-on-one, done it in cross cuts in ways that allowed folks with similar interests, challenges, et cetera, to come together, but are obviously very open to understanding what you all need as we really get into the guts of this work, again, with this shared goal of ensuring that as many folks as possible maintain access and enrollment in health coverage moving forward.
Thank you. And thank you for your active leadership on that. Chike, the last question before I go to questions that have come in is for you, but I do, when you kick off, I do want to open it to everyone else, because we've had a lot of great conversations about the initiatives that you have internally, the way you think about modernizing benefits. We have 30 leaders in the room from states representing about 20 states from across the country. And the reason they're here is they kind of want to plug in to the things that you're doing. What are the best ways for them to give input or participate with you so that you can leverage their expertise in the months ahead?
Sure, I will try and do these quickly. I think first, one of the best things that we've done so far is we've created basically what we call a reference site, basically collecting our latest and greatest best practices. If you go to it's a long URL, I apologize for that. If you go to dol.gov/agency/ETA/UI-modernization.
We will send this in a follow-up
Yeah,
email to
send the follow-up
everyone.
email. But basically, you will see many of our best practices that we've learned over the last 2 years that we have put up for public consumption to be used by folks like you. Again, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that's one. I think two, we also see on that website is direct contact information, because we are consistently looking for state partners to pilot things around plain language, whether that be new ways of ID verification like login. And we are always looking for partners. We cannot have enough. Please reach out. I think the last thing is, as we think about again, there's always this push and pull between states in terms of what's allowable and what's not. We are really encouraging states to think creatively around the authorities they have around their relationship with us. If you have a question on whether you can do a thing, ask us. Do not think that the answer will be a no. Please reach out, because we want to work with you to figure out how we serve customers best. And that's best done in conversation. Again, you will never get turned down there. So those are three really concrete things that you all can do to be part of this modernization of the UI system. And honestly, we can't do it without you.
Yeah, I'd just like to add one other thing. I think also there are opportunities for public comment, right? We try to put a lot of things out in the Federal Register to open up the aperture for public comment. Really, really critical, whether it's states, academics, researchers, really important. So I would also encourage that.
Absolutely.
Any other additions? Otherwise, I'll turn it to Sarah, who I think has had some questions come in.
Yes. Okay, so we have several questions that have come in about what role you see for private entities like companies, nonprofits, and your providers directly in supporting your customer experience goals, and how are you working with them, or maybe how might you like to work with them better?
One of the things I think that a lot of our company partners can do, especially when they see RFIs put out, if they see RFPs put out, is really strongly recommend, if they see a gap in the way that the federal or state agencies are approaching the contract. If it's, I want to build an app and I want it to do this and I want it to do that, and it should do this first and then that second and then that third, is, not to be afraid to, relook at how we're looking at the problem, reframe it around the customer, and really show intentional ways in which, agencies can do a better job of building things around customers. I think if we're seeing those opportunities, whether they're, coming from our side or, our contractor side or vendor side, I think it'll all help, because it will all continue to have that be in the middle of the conversation.
Any other additions there? Otherwise, I'm sure we have more questions.
We do. So several folks have been asking about how we use interactions with real people to inform our work. So at what points are we engaging with end users, and what have we learned about best practices there?
I'm happy to say a bit here, because it's something we've done very, very deeply at Labor, in particular in terms of bluntly just speaking with as many either claimants or folks who did not apply as possible. And we've done that really throughout the entire process. This was a big part of our work in terms of using login.gov and piloting that within the state of Arkansas. Because one thing that we kind of a needle that we were trying to thread is basically, how do we make sure that we throw up barriers to stop criminals and bad actors from getting access to benefits that they didn't deserve, while not throwing up barriers to actual people who need actual benefits. And the only way to do that is to actually test it in real time. So this is everything from focus groups to the classic kind of, let me watch someone use it and look over their shoulder to see what happens. This is also hearing from our state partners as well as our regional office partners to hear what's going on. But the only way to have those interactions is to frankly have them, have them consistently. And we really do encourage looking at the non-consumer who is not applying. I think for all of us who work with benefits, there's a group of people, probably a large group, who never applies at all. And they frankly need to be as much a part of the conversation as those who kind of show up consistently.
Yeah, I'd like to add just one thing. In the beginning of the administration, I watched the Department of Labor deploy U.S. digital service teams to 13 states to actually be on the ground, doing the interviews and getting the research firsthand. So
No, the U.S. Digital Service was a huge partner there, and I see Alicia there who was a huge part of that work.
Thank you. And as a reminder for folks in the room, there is a QR code in your program that you can scan for a link to where to send in your questions. And folks joining us online, you should have had that link dropped in the chat for you. So our next question, several people have been asking about driving internal culture change. And we've heard culture change around human-centered design, around making sure IT has a seat at the table from the beginning. And so how are all of you doing that in your agencies?
I can't speak for the agency. I'm not in an agency right at the moment, but culturally, I think reducing the barrier to entry is one of the key parts. As I said earlier about inviting the right people into the room, giving them a voice in the room is absolutely critical, right? We're all on a digital transformation journey, and you have to bring people along on that journey. Otherwise, you're doing it to them. And people do not tend to react quite as positively when you are doing something to them. So people support what they help create. If they understand it, if they understand what human-centered design, right? There's a lot of buzzwords we use that we expect that everybody else understands. So I just find the time that I've spent in agencies, and now I get to go across all federal agencies, over 400 agencies. And what I hear every single time is making sure you're bringing the entire team with you, including vendors, right? Vendors have to be part of the solution because they deliver so much of the products and services in the federal government. But that is my championing, bringing the right people into the room and educating everybody.
Simchah, please go ahead.
Oh, I would also add that I agree wholeheartedly. And I also want to add that sometimes when agencies that even I've spoken to, or even within our own agency, when they see examples and they see examples of what does a human-centered design type of project even look like? What does that even mean? You know, can I see that? And we have a ton of examples in federal government where we see a lot of this work starting to happen. So I would encourage you all to connect with each other, connect with other federal agencies. I think we're happy to share these stories upon stories, so that way it feels a little bit more tangible. It feels real. It feels like things are accessible. And I think it's a great sharing stories, and sharing those examples are always like really great other practical ways to build that culture.
The only thing I'll add is I think it's probably more for folks who are maybe trying to push those changes. The methods are just methods. And I think people need to start with the end goal in mind. So let's just take plain language for one example. Plain language, human-centered design, all those things. The way that we try to talk about it is we want to use plain language because the reason why you get applications denied and need to be adjudicated and creating huge backlogs is people just didn't understand what they were being asked. Therefore, if we do this right, hopefully the backlog's less, people call less, and we can focus on the core objective. I think at times people are trying to push that, focus too much on the method versus the end goal of that we are trying to create. So I'm just kind of keeping that in mind. And I have found in our agency when we do that, we are far more successful. And I think it's very much true in states as well.
Yeah, I would just add one thing to that. There is no better tactic I have ever seen used than trying to have a conversation about accessibility and asking executives to use a screen reader. It will change every conversation you will ever have. We set up screen readers in the room, had the conversation about accessibility, and then made senior leaders try to access their email and navigate a website with a screen reader. It will change every single conversation, and I really encourage using some of those tactics as well as to Chike's points.
I think that's a great point to end on, of how we get people's actual experience into the process of building these tools and programs. So could you join me in thanking our panel? Thank you all so much. And I want to invite to the stage Alicia and Sarah and our state speakers for the next panel. Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Thanks so much, Tim, and hello to our awesome state panelists. We will introduce these fine folks in just a second. But first wanted to introduce everyone to myself and Sarah Esty. We are leading a new portfolio of work that's been referred to a few times this morning around facing financial shocks. My name is Alicia Rouault. I lead this portfolio from the United States Digital Services based in the Executive Office of the President. Really, this work is around assisting families and individuals who are seeking access to benefit programs in the moments where they face financial shock. I've had the privilege of working in civic technology and in government for over a decade. Focusing my career really on data and technology, but also working with state and local governments and federal partners in this important work. So I was privileged to be the director of state and local government at 18F, at GSA in this very building. Also worked with Department of Labor on unemployment insurance modernization, as Chike just spoke to, and was previously senior advisor at Code for America. But today, I'm really excited to talk through this important portfolio of work around facing financial shock. Sarah and I represent the leads of the implementation phase of this exciting project. The president has tasked OMB with really leading how we change the experience that real people have when applying for and receiving benefits. We are super focused on enabling states who are really doing the work on the ground by relieving the barriers to things like how they share data, how the data infrastructure behind these benefit programs operates and functions and operates in an equitable way. And again, the approach that we're bringing to the work is really all about human-centered design. And what that means is it's placing the individuals and the families at the very center of all of the work that we do, whether that's design research, technology development, or enabling data sharing at the state level. Whether we use technology and data to enable changes, it's important really to think through how people interact with government's front door. So maybe these are front end changes, but we also think about the back end systems and really thinking about how data can connect behind the scenes. So I'll turn to my co-lead, Sarah, to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Esty. I'm a senior advisor at the Administration for Children and Families at HHS. And in a previous life, I was the policy director at Michigan HHS. So I got a firsthand seat from the ground level at both how hard it is to do this work, but also how successful we can be. And so I'm really excited to think about ways that the federal government can better support all of you out in states or at the county level where you're running your programs, and to think about how we can bring this cross-government commitment you saw with our previous panel, the energy behind the customer experience executive order that Alicia was just talking about, and to learn from all of our states who we have here today.
Excellent. So as we embark in this really unique project, working across the federal enterprise, working with our state partners to improve customer experience, we're really focused on the barriers that states are facing. And we're seeking to provide support, technical assistance, technology guidance, and really to initiate a series of small pilots that will begin to unlock what we can possibly do to transform the customer experience. This looks like data sharing, improving how we verify income in the eligibility process, and also really just surfacing some of the best practices that are happening at the state level today.
So the work that Alicia and I are leading is part about listening to state leaders who have made this happen and learning from their experiences and figuring out how we can take their work to the next level. And we would like all of you to replicate their success and go further. We are excited to be kicking off co-development of policy guidance and tools and pilots. So thinking how we can actually do things differently together. And we hope this conversation today will be the start of new partnerships with each of you as we work together to support state benefits delivery. So there will be breakout sessions this afternoon for some of you where we will be going into more detail, but really this is our commitment here that we know this work happens only together. And so with that, I think Alicia is going to introduce our panelists and we'll get started.
Excellent. So that's a little bit about the work ahead, but let's talk to our state leaders. First and foremost, we have Terri Ricks seated in the center, who's recently appointed as Secretary of the Department of Children and Family Services for the great state of Louisiana, where she has served much of her career as Deputy Secretary from 2016 to 2022, and as Undersecretary from 04 to 08. Secretary Ricks started her public service career as an eligibility determinations examiner. Efforts she has led have included expansive use of text messaging, a partnership with Louisiana 211 to provide up-to-the-minute information to the public during emergencies, and a no wrong door service delivery approach with a closed-loop referral system platform. So we will soon hear more from Louisiana. All right, excellent. And to her left, we have Secretary Justin Brown, who is the Secretary of Human Services for the state of Oklahoma. Justin has served 33 agencies, boards, and commissions in the human services space, and from 2019 through 22 served as the director of Oklahoma's Department of Human Services. He introduced a grassroots strategic planning effort and human services operating system known as the True North to help guide departments through the COVID-19 pandemic. Secretary Brown also serves as the chairman of American Public Human Services Association Leadership Council. We are so pleased to have you today. And last but not least, we have Hilma Meneses, who serves as Secretary of Washington State Department of Social and Health Services. Secretary has previously served in executive leadership roles in the nonprofit and higher education sectors as CEO of Catholic Charities in San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo. We welcome you three today, and Sarah and I will join you as we dig into some questions.
All right, my first question is for Secretary Ricks. So you were an early adopter of text notifications for public benefits. Could you tell us a little bit more about your experience with the start of adopting these approaches and how emergencies can drive innovation?
This is a fun experiment. Well, thank you for the question. And I will say that, born out of necessity, the agency started using text messaging platform. We took office in 2016, and in Louisiana, we had a rash of floods starting as soon as we walked into the office. And the largest flood was in August of 2016. Covered most of Louisiana, and there was a newspaper article about one of my foster care workers standing in her home with about calf high and water calling everyone on her caseload to see that the children in foster care were okay. After that, we started looking for a way that we could immediately reach out to the foster community and ensure that everybody was okay. And so we started using a third-party platform called Rave Mobile Safety, and started plussing up our emergency work, particularly looking for foster. Then not long after that, I think the next year, while we were in recovery, we got a lot of feedback from the public about how to recover well. And we also had like some entity called Code for America that started knocking on our door. And I think the entrance came from the governor's office, so I couldn't say no. And then when they came in, the one thing that I heard, because we were building our integrated eligibility system at the time, that couldn't really get into that. And so our IT people weren't really interested in talking to them, but they gave me something that was super valuable. They said that they would map out my service delivery for the clients and for the staff, and how all of the services that were in our agency, how that the clients would interact with other agency services as well. This was information that was very vital to me, but we couldn't get to it because of the storms, for the flood. And so I said, yes, we will do this. Well, it seemed like a little thing, right? It seemed like almost like well, we can't get into the integrated eligibility system and make it better human service design. So I guess we'll just do this pilot about texting. And so the texting pilot came about through really seeing the experience of those we serve. And then we were able to use that same third-party platform that we already had to begin texting broadly. And I think by now our text message count is up to about 60 million texts that we've sent after the pilot. Now we use it to remind people through the SNAP process. We use to tell people about new program services, like when there was the federal rental assistance, like the child tax credit opportunities, like the fact that they need to go check in with their Medicaid caseworker during a time like now.
Thank you for sharing. Our next question is for Secretary Brown. So during the pandemic, a number of changes in how Oklahoma chose to deliver public benefits took place. How, during the outbreak of the pandemic, did you and your department use human-centered design to change delivery?
Wow, that's a great question. So it's important to anchor us back in the work that we did pre-pandemic to really explain the opportunities that we took advantage of during the pandemic. And of course, we would never speak of a global pandemic as an opportunity. I mean, it was a complete disaster for all of our communities, but we were in a position to be more on offense because of the strategic planning that we put in place ahead of time. And that process, called Finding Our True North, elevated for us what is now 9 agency-wide philosophies. And a few of those are relevant to this conversation, so I'll bring those up. Executive leadership true north number 2 is removing systemic barriers that keep our customers from accessing resources. Number 8 is moving upstream, meeting families before they become in crisis, so that we never know them in the child welfare division. We only know them in our safety net divisions. And then number 9 is building a world-class customer experience, rivaling private sector organizations across our country. And so those 3 really influenced the work that we were going to do sort of going forward. Then the pandemic hit, and we really sort of accelerated some of that work. Because of our desire to move to the space of removing systemic barriers, we had a 6,000 laptop order in before the pandemic. We had an order for state-issued cell phones with hotspots for every single employee pre-pandemic. So as the pandemic hit, all of this hardware became to come in. And then, of course, we had to train 6,000 employees on how to use some of the tools that are now available to them. So all of that was really the beginning of this concept of changing the distribution model for human services in Oklahoma, with the true intent to meet people where they are with strategic interventions necessary to support their families. All of that was facilitated by sort of an undercurrent of human-centered design. So to your question, we built what I call a design thinking continuum within our agency. So leveraging design thinking tools like personas and journey maps and those sorts of things at the very sort of frontline levels of our system. So in many places, of course, we have not achieved perfection. I use that term all the time. In many spaces and subcultures across our agency, we have frontline workers who know what a persona is and who know how to at least do the beginnings of a journey map for the people that they serve. And the intent for us is to truly build a culture that is centered on the person that we're serving. And you have to be extremely intentional about that. That doesn't happen by accident. So the short answer sort of the semi-short answer to the long answer is that our design thinking continuum really allowed for us to look at the priorities that were necessary, that we elevated through our agency pre-pandemic to accelerate the transformation during the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Secretary Meneses, Washington has been a leader in using waivers to improve the policy behind public benefits programs. Could you tell us more about the vision behind that approach and what other states could learn from those programs?
Thank you for your question. Before I answer that, I want to give a big shout out to my colleague, Bab Roberts over there. She's our division director in our Economic Services Administration. And I would say she is the leader of waivers. It is because of Babs that we have many waiver requests, but also many waivers with our federal partners. And the staff, so the waivers are about, I would say, about the federal regulations. The waivers are about thinking outside the box, not reading the federal regulations so literally that we can't do our work. And so the waivers are about asking our federal partners to think outside the box so that we can get to that human-centered design, right? And so, for example, I'll give you an example. In the state of Washington, we have 29 federally recognized tribes. And many of our clients who receive public benefits are tribal members. It is very challenging for a tribal member for example, in Eastern Washington, to get to an office that we run to provide benefits or to apply for benefits. So one of the waivers that we have is to allow at least one tribe, and hopefully more if they get accepted, and we're waiting, right? But one of the waivers that we did receive was to allow one particular tribe, Port Gamble, to have an office with tribal employees, not state employees, because the requirement is for state employees to be the ones reviewing the applications, right? So Port Gamble, however, now gets to review the applications and the eligibility requirements and certify on behalf of the state of Washington. The federal government finally gave us a waiver, and we're doing some great work with Port Gamble. But we've also put in a request for 12 other tribes and hopefully 29 total soon. That's just so that the tribal members don't have to go all the way to our office, but rather the tribes can do it themselves with training, of course, and moderation right? So that's just one minor example. And there are many others, including allowing reinstatement of basic food benefits closed for failure to provide required verification with a new application, right? So for example, if a person has forgotten to send in their certification documents, the technical wording in the federal regulations is to cut them off immediately within a few days. Well, this waiver allows for us to remind them and allow them some time to bring in their paperwork. That's just one minor, another big one. And there are many more to follow. And again, my colleague Babs has done an exceptional job. We have many waivers. In fact, I have a whole list of them over here that I could talk about for hours. But I also just want to acknowledge my colleagues regarding their technical, the digital vision. And sorry to get off track, but it's music to my ears, because when I came to this job a year ago, the very first thing that I said to my colleagues at the state of Washington was, technology and digital modernization has to be the foundation of any entity today in today's age. The failure to have that is a detriment to society in today's age. And it's interesting to me that the federal government and the state governments are lagging compared to the private sector and the nonprofit sector even in this area. It's very interesting. So I'm looking forward to even more conversation about that.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to shift into a portion where we send you off with some questions for the whole group, so feel free to respond. You talked a lot about the success in each of your states, which sounds incredible. Wanted to hear a little bit more about the biggest barriers that you face to improving benefits delivery, and maybe think through how might the federal government better help you in that work.
Well, I have some answers to that. My new middle name with my counterparts is the word procurement. I talk a lot. So when the first panel discussion was about procurement, it resonated deeply to all of us. But there are barriers everywhere in these systems. I would tell you that over the last 3 years or ish, the 30 state leaders in this room and all of those outside have become warriors in our spaces. And these are people who are fighting barriers daily to do good in our communities. And so these warriors are here to be partners today and for the long term. And I would tell you, partnership requires authentic relationship. And that's what we are building with one another, is true peer support. Because we know, and I think it was alluded to earlier, we know that there is more coming. We don't know what that is. We don't know if it's another pandemic. We don't know if it's effects of things like climate change or economic downturns or whatever. But these systems are here to be the boots on the ground warriors in these spaces. And we need help overcoming those barriers. And those barriers, of course, are things like procurement and culture and workforce and politics and all of those things, but this group is here to build authentic relationships, and that's how generally the government and partners in other sectors can help us to overcome those barriers on the ground.
Yeah, I'd love to add a little bit to that. It's very important that we have conversations before we roll out new things that will impact us. I think about the work in PEBT and how difficult it has been. I think there were some assumptions that state government agencies really were able to, quickly partner and share data and information, that actually we have a true, like a real state law that really does not allow for the local schools to share data with the state. And so we went through quite a bit of work and lots of expense at that. I was very encouraged by the previous panel and the remarks that were stated earlier about finding some things that are common among all of us and sort of making them happen and procuring at a different, space so we all can enjoy that. I think about how much we're paying, for example, for an EBT card. There seems to be something that we should be able to do about that, for example. The other thing I would say is that it sort of pains me a little bit. One of my previous jobs was general counsel of the state's housing finance agency. And really, we shouldn't be having conversations that don't include housing. There are too many people that don't have housing in this world. And in a state like Louisiana, where we have so much poverty, there are many more people than we would like to acknowledge that are not being shocked by anything financially that happened. They were born into it. They don't know how to not be in it. And our programs are not helping them get out of it. And anytime we're not actually having true conversations about what housing, what do we feel like it is okay for people to have and to live? I think we're missing some of it, right? Childcare, housing, these are not afterthoughts. These are things that happen all together. And unfortunately, we're not having enough conversations, I think, that include real, true, hierarchy of needs, conversations. And so housing is super important. And I think we need to make sure that we're always thinking about the basic needs that people have, and not just those that fall for some reason, but have always been deep in the gorge, and they didn't fall to get there. They were born into it.
So I think that the biggest barrier, at least that I've noticed in the state of Washington, unfortunately, has been our federal partners. And music to my ears this morning, yes, with our federal partners and what they have had to share with us. I loved hearing all of them because they had a common theme of being good partners to each other and to us. And I absolutely love that. But unfortunately, that doesn't always filter down. Right? And so that's a problem. So talking about shared data, for example, we want to share data within the state of Washington, within our agencies, but we're not allowed. For one federal partner might say to us, no, you can't share with that other side of the house because it's about SNAP and you're not supposed to, or it's about this other and you're not supposed to. And if you do, by the way, you're going to get penalized. That's not a partnership. When we're told we can't share the name of the individual that we are giving a benefit to with the other side of the house, we know they're also qualified there. That's a barrier. Or another example, we were ready to give free tuition in the state of Washington to anybody who qualifies for SNAP and TANF. Doesn't that sound wonderful? Don't you think that anybody who qualifies for SNAP or TANF should get free tuition? Right? Because we all know, I was in academia for almost 20 years, folks, and a dean of a law school. I know how important education is. Okay, it is one of the key barriers or key elements to fighting poverty. But we were told that we were going to get penalized if we share data with our education space. That's a barrier. That's a barrier. And I'm sorry our federal partners left. But we'll continue sharing. And mind you, the folks that were here this morning, they know it, they get it. Music to my ears, what they said. I absolutely loved it. But when we talk about culture change, we need to change the culture all the way down at the federal level and at the state level. So when my colleagues in the state of Washington, those reporting up to Babs and others, say to us, sorry, we can't do that, Secretary, because USDA or whoever says that we can't share these names with the other side of the house that you run. I run 5 administrations. What do you mean? It's all the same house. We call it the DSHS Human Services House, by the way. And one part of the house, the left and the right, should be able to talk to each other, but we can't. And that's because of the federal regulations. For me, that's the biggest barrier.
Thank you. All right, so building on that, we heard this morning from folks about some of the efforts they're undertaking and would like to hear more about which of those are particularly exciting to you, and where you see opportunities for agencies to provide further support. So definitely hear it on the culture change piece. What are any other pieces you're most excited to see action on?
Well, I heard Terri talk a little bit about some of the common tools that we use potentially that we could sort of leverage one another's work. And that was mentioned in the prior panel. And so it is things like human-centered design elements. That is a really important foundational component of the work that we do. And there is no reason that the Department of Human Services in Oklahoma shouldn't use the same personas that FNS uses, right? Like let's rally around the same person and invest in those sorts of tools. And so I appreciated that. Also, a little bit to one of your earlier points, I really did appreciate the conversation around PEBT as an example but really needing to understand that there's sometimes a difference between policy and on the ground tools that are available in states. And so that relationship is super important. But there was a lot that was mentioned earlier that candidly I didn't know about beforehand. And I was sitting there a little bit embarrassed because I didn't know about some of the tools that were available potentially through the federal government. And so I made some notes on things to follow up on. But I think that, you know, what I've sort of answered the prior question is the way the federal government can help is authentic relationship. And with authentic relationship, there would have been greater awareness of some of those tools that are available.
One thing I'd like to acknowledge is I've been in several rooms that have been really great. People, right attitudes. I think I just need to kind of like capture my state CIO and just take him with me wherever I go. Unfortunately, he serves the entire state. I really would like to go back to a time where I had had my own technologist in the Department of Children and Family Services that I could take with me wherever I went, and we could actually get to another place. And so would like to acknowledge that some of the work that's happened over the past 15 years or so about, you know, putting all the technology people in one space may or may not be really helping us well in the states. And so I think there might be some efforts that we could do to have our CIOs in the states actually hear the things that the federal government, those who spoke earlier are speaking about. I did, however, send a quick text message to our really great CIO in Louisiana and asked him about which one was it about the identity
Login.gov.
Login.gov. And he said, oh yeah, we use a different platform. So no, we haven't looked at it. Now we are using something in Louisiana that was built in Louisiana for Louisiana, and it has helped us. But when the question was made, it's like, what else should we be thinking about? And I think there is that in the state of Louisiana, we've spent last 15 to 20 years moving on to an enterprise architecture, right? That is not the same as what all the new things, bells and whistles that are being built at the federal government. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we're out of it altogether? And I think it was right when it was stated earlier that those of us who may be sitting in spaces as secretaries may not understand everything that is being talked about. And so it has been a new language that I've had to learn. And I think it's right. What you're doing is that we all have to learn it. And if we're holding it back from some people in our agency, that may be part of the struggle. But thanks.
Well, as I said, modernizing IT is the foundation of any entity in today's age. And I've made that quite clear to our colleagues and share that vision with my colleagues at DSHS and in other agencies in the state of Washington. In Washington, we have a state tech division or agency, but at DSHS, my agency, and we have about 20,000 employees. And at DSHS, each of our administrations, when I started, each of the administrations had their own IT departments. Various numbers in staff. And I decided to create a chief technology and innovation officer. Mind you, there's the word innovation in there for a reason. So we have a CTIO, and now all of the administration's IT people report up to that CTIO, and we use what we call a matrix system to support each of the administrations. Most of you are aware of a matrix type of organizational structure. So all of those tech people report up to my CTIO, and then she obviously does the matrix to serve each of the administrations. But with the vision that we have to modernize technology for the entire DSHS house, rather than just one section of the house, going back to my earlier comment. And not just in delivery of services, which is the key, because that's what our business is about, delivering public service, right? Providing public benefits and so on. But in everything we do, from using different platforms to engage with each other in the virtual space, to document imaging, to you name it, right? You said you're using a text software. Excellent. We should, when I was in academia, we had text software 20 years ago. You have to inform students what time to come to class if there's a snowstorm, right? Okay. Well, in the state of Washington, we should be able to do the same with each other, and we're not yet. We've had several emergencies throughout the United States, floods, et cetera, fires, and so on. One software that we need right now is a text software, to your point, an emergency management text software. So it's about everything we do. So for us, and we're building that culture of the urgency of modernizing our technology. I would say that's the number one effort for us, and it is in the performance evaluations and deliverable metrics of all my direct reports.
Thank you. So I think we're going to just have one more question, and you really teed it up nicely, and then we'll shift to our audience. All of you have kind of touched on the issue around legacy technology systems, as well as the procurement to actually buy new technology. You spoke to this a bit, but curious if you've had success in overcoming some of these challenges, and if you could share kind of the specifics of how you've gone about that.
How do you spell success? I think that's an interesting question. I think we have actually, hey, the right way to do this is to figure out like what you want to, how you want to make changes in practice before you start doing your technology system. And then the right way to do that is like a little bit at a time, I think, until you really build up what you need. It's important to understand that procurement really is a problem, right? And so I'll tee this up that a year ago, about 2 years ago, right at the beginning of the pandemic, we worked with a foundation to contract on our behalf with an entity to help us figure out, do an assessment of our child support division, our policies, our practices, and how to change moving into a more family-centered child support division. Now, we're right now in the process of the APD, so there's 3 years later, right? To create the child support, the new technology for child support, and hopefully it will be our last legacy system that falls. That won't be the case, but it should have been. Anyway, had I not been able to, in a 3-month period, get back the information that I needed to begin the changes in the child support area so that we would know what to put in the build and the RFP for the system, we would have just started building a new electronic version of the same not human-centered design that we already had. And so unfortunately, the success really came about from reaching into a different partner and asking them to help us, not in so much that we really found a way to be successful ourselves. But I think that also brings into mind perhaps how those funders who are able and willing to step in space can partner with us to get around some of these things while the federal government is trying to fix it, if you will, and then also dealing with what barriers there are in the state as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think our success has been incredibly limited in technology replacement. In part with the success we've experienced is a similar experience in that a large foundation actually purchased and procured a product for us on our behalf, that then that period of time then allowed for us to get the contracting vehicles in place to own it and to continue to evolve it. But we are sitting on something like a dozen wireframes built with deep human-centered design that are transformative in our biggest programs. Probably, I'm going to estimate 3 years to build them, and I've told it could be as many as 5 years to buy them. So it's longer to procure than it is to actually build the transformative technology. So we are in that space right now. And so this is a particularly sensitive question for me this morning.
I will say just one other thing, though. The fact that we were able to use this third party texting, for example, that has really had some transformative outcomes, right? Like before, we'd have like 42% of people like churning off for a Snap because they just forgot to send us something. That dropped down to 24 when we started sending reminders, for example, right? And so it's important to figure out, I think, what you can do without changing your big systems. What can you do that'll make a big difference with laying on top of something old? What can you do, right? And so trying to make sure that we're still moving the mark once we understand what people need without big, hairy transformations that have to do with technology and procurement, I think is important. The Rave mobile safety that we've been using for our texting, for example, was on NASPO, I think, and we were able to get it like very quickly and then make it a lot bigger. Now we use it for lots of different things, but most importantly is actually reaching out to the real people, not just those that have that are active in our caseload, but also those who applied and maybe are not active in our caseload.
So integrated technology, absolutely. Again, it's my number one priority in the state. We are in the verge of being successful, but we're not there yet. But however, one thing that might be different in our state, I don't know, compared to others in that area, is that I and my colleagues from other agencies have formed a coalition, an HHS coalition. So it's not just the secretary of DSHS, but the secretaries and or directors of other agencies at the table. And together we are owning integrated technology. Again, for the same reasons that I just stated, we don't want our federal partners to be siloed. And it's in the state level, we shouldn't be siloed within each agency as well. We should be working together. So we call that coalition G1. We have G1 oversees and governs this whole integrated technology effort, which is starting, and it's going to be great. I know it's going to be great, but to your point, it's going to take years because we have those turtles in the way, and those exist in both state and federal. So to Terri's point, having what we call them tugboats, those other software and or digital platforms that can help in the interim, right? Those are critical because we can't just stay in 1955. We're in 2023, right? So any technology that you can bring in now, and for example, you again, I'll mention the texting. In December, we learned that several thousand people, and I think this happened throughout the United States, several thousand people who had EBT cards, their EBT funds were being fraudulently phished, right? Just like a credit card sometimes is compromised, well, EBT cards are often compromised as well. So people who were relying heavily on their cash, on EBT for putting food on the table or pay or whatever else, their monies were gone. And the federal guidelines prohibit reimbursement with federal funds when a person has lost their EBT money. So in the state, our governor gave me the authority to reimburse from state funds to these folks, at least some of the monies, so that they could put food on the table on December 25th, at least, right? Anyway, our legacy systems would have easily prevented us from doing that. And there was a lot of stir inside. How are we going to do this with ACES and this legacy system? And we said, just use some quick texting technology. And so we did. That's the tugboat, right? To get notice to all of those folks who had lost their monies, that all of a sudden they were going to get a few $100s, and this is the way to get it. So those tugboats are really critical while we wait for the big mothership. That's my analogy.
I also want to just quickly make
yeah,
sure it's
please.
clear that when I talk about procurement as being the barrier, it is not exclusive to federal procurement. I mean, it is really as much as anything, it is the complexities of 50 individual state procurement processes that then are required to layer into the federal process, and the intersection between those two creates significant delays. And so I just want to make sure that's clear, that this isn't
Absolutely. Well, on behalf of the federal partners in the room, we're so excited to begin building this relationship, and we'll dig into procurement a lot more later. Now we're going to hand it off to Tim for just a few more questions from the audience.
I'm going to kick off with Secretary Brown. You said that one of your strategic goals was to create a customer experience that rivaled the private sector. Private sector traditionally has far more risk tolerance than government when optimizing customer experience. How have you changed your perspective on risk tolerance to accomplish this goal?
So I came from the private sector 3.5 years ago. I had 0 government experience and 0 human services experience. And I was connected to lots of nonprofit organizations that served in this space. And my private sector experience connected to the work that we do, but I had no government experience. So I walked in with a pretty high level of risk tolerance. And we have done incredible work in that space. One of the sort of mindsets that you have to go into is that we do not accept poor customer experience. And so I can talk for days about this, but I'll give one example. Our contact center in our OKDHS Life experience, which is the safety net programs, we operated 3 different technologies in that contact center. So one was the original release of Avaya, one was an AT&T Hunt Group, and the third was the brand new version of a contemporary technology that we didn't know how to use. So I asked the team, hey, what I started seeing online. So I actually do my own social media stuff. And so I started seeing some feedback from the community that they were waiting forever on the contact center. So I asked for the data, and they couldn't give it to me because we had 3 different types of technology. So we brought in a partner to come in and do an evaluation. The data he gave me indicated that we answered the phone 100% of the time. Tier 1 always answered the phone, but we had an 87% forced reject rate. So when we went from tier 1 to tier 2 to actually help you, we hung up on you 87% of the time. I was furious. I mean, I don't get furious about things. I was furious, and our team was furious. The ones who were responsible for it were furious. They had no idea that that's what was happening because of the tools that we provided to them to serve their customers were so poor and disconnected. And so we, of course, leaned into it. We provided, of course, more team members and leaned into the right technology. Now a typical day is a 4% abandon rate in 20 seconds. That's world-class customer experience for that contact center. So it starts with the culture and the mindset of not accepting a level of service that you wouldn't accept in your own life for the people that we serve.
That's great. Thank you. I think this is for everyone. How are you building customers into your human-centered design strategies? And how can the federal government help you in those efforts?
How are we including customers?
Yes.
So we're trying in various ways. We are meeting with various nonprofits and then serve customers on a monthly basis. That's one, and understanding what is happening on the ground with that group. But we also have in the state of Washington what we call poverty reduction workforce. And in that workforce, and there's 2 components to that, but both components, we invite members for the public who have experienced public benefits in one way or another to provide input, whether a person is unsheltered or continuously or previously or et cetera, right? Or whether a person is applying or has applied for certain types of benefits from us, they are invited to the table. And they're actually more than invited, they're appointed by the governor. They've been selected by some of those nominated by some of those community partners, the nonprofits, to be at the table. And then they've received nominations and appointments by the governor to sit on these workforces. So that's among some of the ways. But we're trying to really get out to the community, including myself, and talk to our partners who have access directly to our customers, and of course our online workers, our staff who deal with our public on a daily basis are critical as well to sharing that experience and to connecting us. So we're doing it as much as possible. We absolutely need the voices of our customers in order to understand what they need. Like any other industry, whether you're a shoe company or a telephone company, or a public benefits company, all right? We need to know what the customer has in mind and how they can access the services that they need.
And I know we're closing time. I would say that we're actually learning a lot from Washington State and have enrolled some various ways. I think I personally recognize I need to understand poverty a lot better than I did. And I think that all of us do. And I think how can the federal government, I think that all of us who are making decisions need to actually spend some time with people who are in deep poverty. And really understand that there is a difference in the way that we serve people who are, there's migrant poverty and there's generational poverty, or somebody who just lost a job. It requires different service. And I think as long as we are sort of sitting up here talking about it and not getting on the ground and living with people and really seeing what's going on, then we're gonna keep making missteps.
That's all we have time for. Thank you.
All right, I think that is it. So ending on a great note about listening to the people we serve, and thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you to the panel.
My God, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to Sarah and Alicia. Thank you, Secretaries Brown, Ricks, Meneses, for all of those insights, that conversation. I love the layering of this morning's discussions. And I just want to do a couple of quick takeaways and then turn this over to OMB to wrap this morning. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists, both on the federal panel and the state panel, for sharing not just the letter of the law, what the executive orders are, what the opportunity is, but to actually being willing to put tough items about what really is in the way of succeeding on this shared goal, what it's really going to take to do that. I think that the candor we heard today is indicative of the kind of trust that feels emergent in this room and in this opportunity. This is a long runway. The 2 years of the Financial Shocks Project it's not a quick fix. It's not something that that is just wanting to say, we just made these commitments, now we can all go home and not really know what happens. There really is a desire here across folks to do stuff in a different way, in an enduring way, because at the heart of it are the households that, for whatever reason, each of us choose to sit in these seats and do this work as our career. There's a personal story there for you, and in a different room and time. I hope that we get some time to hear that about each other's reasons for choosing this work. Just to recap a couple of things for me, I did hear in that last conversation, in all of this today, a real sense of urgency and ambition about rolling up our sleeves, working collaboratively, intentionally, and intelligently on the benefits modernization that is driven every day in your work, but in particular is given a real opportunity with the OMB's new directives around this work. I also heard a real pragmatism and candor about the barriers that need to be dealt with, not just at the top of the house in this process, but throughout organizational cultures in both federal and state agencies, to effectively take on the headwinds that the leaders here in this room are willing and ready to grapple with. And I also just want to remind us that in terms of who's here, we've been laser focused on the state and federal government and leadership and the government challenges to collaboration. But there's a lot of stakeholders in the room today and listening in for the last several hours online, from civic tech, from nonprofits, from the private sector, and from philanthropy, who are here. They're listening deeply because they want to be effective partners in this work. And so I'm excited that the rest of the day is going to really be some of those cross-sector conversations and some of the real initial work that takes on. So thank you again for coming. Thank you so much to our partners at OMB for co-sponsoring this incredible day. And to close us out, I want to invite up OMB's Deputy Director, Jason Miller, to the stage. Is Jason here? Come on up, Jason. For those who don't know Jason, he formerly served as Deputy Director for the National Economic Council in the Obama administration and was the CEO for the Greater Washington Partnership as well. And I don't think we could have a better person to wrap us up today. So thank you so much, Jason.
Great. Thank you. I thank you to you and your team for co-hosting this event with us, with this amazing group of cross-sector leaders, both here with us in the room and also watching this event live. I want to lift up and start with two charges that the president has given to us. First is a statement he made in his first joint session in Congress. And I think it does tie very directly to the work that we do, that this day is about. We have to prove democracy still works, that our government still works and can deliver for our people. And the second charge, whenever he talks about the delivery of services from the government, he says we have to meet people where they are, And these two things are absolutely linked. I had the opportunity to represent the U.S. government this past fall in Europe at the OECD, where we were talking about democracy and the direct linkage to service provision by government. If we are not meeting people's basic needs with the services we provide, the fundamental structure of our countries come into question. And that is a real question, particularly for countries in Europe, as they see some of the challenges, and we see some of the challenges around the world. So bringing it to the work today, government is a massive service provider. We're an absolutely massive service provider. And the expectations for our service delivery, for better or worse, are not high. In some ways, that's an advantage for us as we march forward. We're a massive service provider. We have laws and regulations. We have budgets and appropriations. We have longstanding practices. We have a set of longstanding capabilities throughout our governments, federal, state, and local. But what the discussions here are about today, about the charge the president gave us, meeting people where they are, it's about putting ourselves in the shoes of the people we serve. We've got lots of people in this room who are experts in human or user-centered design, another way to say that, but ultimately about putting ourselves in the shoes of the people we serve and designing our services accordingly will have a dramatic impact. Undoubtedly for government, this is a change. Many of you are navigating and leading that change. It requires both specific practices, human-centered user design, using new kinds of technology, but also requires change management. It requires breaking down barriers and silos, new ways of thinking, new capabilities, getting people to see that the thing that they thought was a brick wall doesn't actually exist. When we do this kind of work, when we put ourselves in the shoes of the people we serve, not only are we going to better serve them, but we're going to have better, broader programmatic outcomes. We're going to have better performing federal agencies, state and local agencies. We're going to have more efficient services. For the 87% of people who got dropped, they probably called back, or they tried to come into an office or find another way to get their service provided. Not only did they spend many minutes of their time, they spent government resources picking up more calls, answering online requests, mail, in-person services. We can do it better. We can meet people where they are with better services, more efficiently, and better outcomes. I had the privilege of supporting the federal efforts to implement the President's Student Debt Relief Program. And I just want to give that as a quick example of a different way of thinking. We started by designing that service around meeting people where they are and what their needs were. We designed an application that people could go online and apply for in less than 5 minutes. Some people replied how they did that and where, in some cases, where they were sitting when they did it, or stopped in the middle of a party and everybody applied at the same time. We had 8 million people apply in a weekend. The website worked the entire time. The soon-to-be former White House Chief of Staff noted that we significantly outperformed Ticketmaster when they tried to handle Taylor Swift tickets. But it was really about saying, look, let's put the problems on us, not on the people that we're trying to serve. We have their information. Let's use their data. Let's not ask them for it again. Let's not make them prove things that they've already proven to us. We had more than 26 million people provide information to the federal government. We were ready. We had approved more than 16 million people for student debt relief. We're going to march forward on that specific program, but I use it not on the topic of student debt relief, but just on we can design things in a different way. No one would have thought we could design a program for millions and millions of people with a federal website that worked, that handled massive amounts of volume, that people walked away and said, oh my God, that was easy. I saw a poll that 97% of people said that it was a very good experience in applying. There's not, back to we are outperforming the private sector. That is absolutely the charge that we should have. And there's not a lot of services out there where people say, I had a very good experience, 97%. So the reality today, we know that that is not the experience most people have in the provision of government services most of the time. We have a lot of work to do. We know we have a lot of work to do at the federal government. We know we have a lot of work to do of being a better partner for all of our state and local leaders here. We know we have work to do to be a better partner. And that's why I'm so excited about this event. I'm so excited about this collaboration. It is about rolling up our sleeves together because ultimately we are shared delivery partners. We have the same customer. We are shared delivery partners. Ultimately, it is one delivery system. And we need to iron out the kinks. We need to figure out where we are creating inadvertent barriers, and we need to knock through the brick walls that we thought existed that may not actually be there. So I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being here. I want to say thank you to the work that you are doing each and every day. It is absolutely inspiring to hear about what so many of you are accomplishing. I want to say thank you to the future partnership that we will have in improving the delivery of our services for the people we serve. And I want to speak specifically about the services that we are here today. If we have a broader focus across the entirety of the federal enterprise on improving the experience of our customers. There's a huge range of services, whether that's our national park service, it's applying for a loan. If we are going to improve our experiences, there's no place that we should focus on more than serving those amongst us who are most vulnerable. Interestingly, those are often the places where we create the highest hurdles and the biggest barriers to actually access our federal services, where we don't value the minutes and the hours and the anxiety and the pain that our inefficiency in service delivery causes to people. If we are going to focus on the customer experience, there's no customer that matters more than those who are most vulnerable amongst us, which is why I am so excited about what we might accomplish together. It is why we made facing a financial shock one of the limited set of life experiences that we are organizing our customer experience around. And I'm just appreciative that all of you are here. There's nothing more valuable than our minutes for those that we serve and for all of you. So thank you for spending some minutes here today together. I have no doubt that will be an incredible return on your time. And I'm looking forward to the big things that we're going to be able to do together. So thank you. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.